Obviously, Barney Point has a lot of history about it, and certainly in the days of settlement in the area, it's well documented the sorts of things that used to happen here with the British troops while they were stationed here, and the setting up of Port Curtis. This wasn't just one tribal group was here, right? So there was lots of different groups would come from western area, north and south, and come here for specific activities, and it could have been at the time of for fishing and gathering of shellfish and the like. Also, we believe there was marriage happening and people being promised in marriage. So they'd all come down here and gather around, have a bit of a shindig, and so some of the young bucks might spot some of the younger ladies, and their eye on them, and so till the next time they came back, they'd prepare that girl for that time, and the young men as well. So yeah, there was more to it than just coming here for a bit of a party. With a lot of places, I mean, we had connections too because there was food and plentiful supplies, right? There was an abundance, right? So, and if you're a good fisherman, which I'm not, you could get a feed for your family, and for us kids way back then in the 50s, it was a time of come here to play. So Friday afternoon, we'd come down here and muck around in the swings and the sand and the water, and then the rest of the weekend, it was all 24-hour playtime. So before they remodelled the Barney Point end, so that was the point, right? So it was a rocky outcrop, and it run from where we can see now right up for about a kilometre or more, and it was nearly as wide across as it was long. And during the war, the Americans were here, and there was a lot of movement of soil and the like, and so most of the trees had been knocked over, and they had set up camps there as well. And so our locals used to come over here and trade with them as well, right? So so what happened, there used to be good fishing spots and stuff. They used to call the rocks. So Barney Point was known for its rocks and its mud. There's still some reserves there today. And so there was a favourite fishing spot of Dad's, was just there, western end of the point. Dad had a special spot there we used to call Salmon Rocks, and that was his special spot. He'd go there for the tide in and then the tide out, and I'd be tied out as well. By the time the tide came in, I was gone. Anyway, he used to catch a large salmon, big king salmon they were, with the big whiskers on them, and so I'd be at home or playing with my mates somewhere, and then he'd come home, and anyway, yeah, it was my job to scale and gut the fish, and then he used to come down and he'd chop it up with the axe, and he'd say, right, there's a portion there, another portion here, so 4 or 5 portions, maybe about a pound or 2 in the old measure of meat, you know, fresh fish. And so I'd take that around and drop it off at different houses around the neighbourhood. Sometimes they'd come back and they'd have a share. It might be crabs, prawns, anything like that, mullet or whatever, they'd come back and they'd share it as well. So we looked after one another. That was our little village, I suppose you'd call it. And so that's what used to happen. And at the same time, just sitting here in this spot, I'm thinking about there was pensioner units up there on that hill. So where those brick houses are, there was old pensioner units there, and a lot of our people used to live there as well. And so that you're probably going back to the early 60s, late 70s when they were there. And obviously, as the boom happened and everything like that, they moved those old people out and knocked those huts down. And so that was sorts of things that happened at Barney Point. And further over the hill, on the other side, we call the back beach. And the back beach is where we got periwinkles and a special place we call Piggery Creek. And Piggery Creek was one of those places where I believe there was a piggery towards that area in the years before. And so I guess a lot of the stuff that came out of the piggery used to run down that creek, hence the name. But it was a source of seafood. So the crabs loved it, the big fish loved it, and the kids here in Barney Point, we all loved it. We'd climb the mangroves, get covered in mud, and have a real good time. And so even when the tide went out, we wouldn't go home. We'd just lay around and slide around in the mud like mud skippers. And so, yeah, it was a lifestyle that we loved. Yeah. And the only time we'd go home, we'd either go home and have a feed or go home to get cleaned up and have a sleep because we were tired. Or sometimes my mum in particular used to get my big brother to put the whistle. He used to whistle from home down there in Barney Street, and I could hear him over there over the back beach. And that's it, my time to go. You know, the lights would be coming on the street lights, and when we had them in those days. And that was a signal to return back to the nest. So, yeah, so we had a great old growing up over here in Barney Point. These bunyip trees, they weren't here. When I was a kid, they weren't here, right? So it was towards maybe 17 or 18, these trees were put in place. So it was about 50 odd years ago. And so that's why they're as big as they are. I heard a story the other day that for one of these bunyip nut trees to bear fruit, it has to be in the ground for 100 years. So I don't know that this soil is the best sort of soil for growing these bunyip nut trees, but these will be no older than 60 years, no way in the world. We used to go to quite a few other places, right? So there was a place we called the Railway Dam, and the Railway Dam back in the day was the drinking water supply for Gladstone, right? And so it was part of a creek which they put a wall up and then turned it into like a reservoir. And so, and it's still there today, and they call it the duck pond today. But back in the day, it used to house families who came here for seasonal work. So the meatworks was seasonal. And so lots of our families that lived in Bundaberg and other places used to come here in killing season to work at the meatworks. And so there'd be dozens of them over there at Happy Valley, and they used to party a lot, especially on payday, which was I think Wednesday. Anyway, then they decided to change the payday to Friday because a lot of the people wouldn't go to work on Thursday or Friday. And so Happy Valley became a meeting place, and there was people from, I suppose I should mention that prior to the meatworks being knocked down and QAL being built, there wasn't a lot of families here. There might have been 8 or 9 Murray families, you know, and a lot of them didn't belong to country. Most of them came from elsewhere, and they were getting jobs in the railway, on the council, on the port, those sorts of jobs. And then QAL started in 1964. They knocked down the old works, built the alumina plant, started in 65. They're still going today. It was only supposed to go for 50 odd years, but anyway. And so it became a place for people from all over Australia, really, to come here. Lots of people from North Queensland and Victoria and South Australia and New South Wales came here to work. It was a single man's town, right, Gladstone, in the 60s. There was never many girls in Gladstone to start with. But then these blokes came here, and some of them may have been married, but they'd left their wives behind. Some had run away from their wives and families. But anyway, it was a single man's town, and so what happens when you got 600 single men roaming around town of a weekend? Invariably you're going to have fist fights and arguments and all sorts of stuff. And so that used to occur a lot And that place where they used to put them in the camp, the quarters, was just over my back fence. And so I seen it all, heard it all, and witnessed it all from close quarters. So, you know, I was 1964, I'm 13. Yeah, 65, I'm 14. So instead of going to King's Cross to get my experience, it was there over the back fence in Barney Point. And so, yeah, things started to change from that time forward. So there are a lot of things that today I reflect back and I think, if only I'd have been smart enough back then to take advantage of what was happening here in town. You know, and my old man, he never knew anything about economics or investments and all that sort of stuff. You know, even today I'd be flat out advising my grandsons or sons or daughters how they should best invest their money. But we certainly didn't have an idea or a clue about it. But a lot of other people did. They've made lots of money out of investing in this place, and so, you know, we as a group of people who've been on the bottom edge of that economic and socio-economic ladder, we didn't really cotton on to what the opportunities were, and the little it took to invest to do well in the economy. So yeah, I look back on that with a bit of regret. I remember one day I was working with Thies, was the contractors, putting in the big pipeline from Awonga Dam through to Gladstone. Anyway, this old bloke said to us one day, me and a few of my mates had been working there for about 12 months, and he said, "Oh, you boys have been here a while now." "Yeah." "Why is that?" His name was Cliff, always remember him. And he said, "You must have a bit of money saved up now." We said, yeah, why is that?" He said, "Oh, I've got a bit of land down there at Boyne Island." He said, "You might be interested in." "Yeah, where is it?" He said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "Just back from the beach," he said, 1 or 2 streets from the beach. "How much?" He said, "Oh, $300. And and we said, "Oh, no, we're going to Brisbane to buy motorbikes." Idiots, yeah. So you can't buy those blocks for under $500,000 today. I was born up here in Gladstone, and so the family lived in the what we know today as the Gladstone State High School grounds, right? So there was 2 houses and a shed in this particular area where the bottom oval is now today, and one of those other houses were lived in by a Scots family who came from Scotland. They emigrated over here back in the day, and they live side by side. That family still friends ours today, you know. I'm 70, so over 70 years ago, we were all living there together. And so the daughters of that family, they're still involved in stuff today, and we have a good time when we see them. Yes. Mum and Dad went and seen the Member of Parliament at the time, and, you know, talked about, look, we need somewhere to live, we've got a growing family. And I wasn't party to that conversation, but that's what I heard. And so they ended up with a brand new housing commission house over there at 113 Barney Street. The family lives there today. So one of my older sisters, that's her place, she lives there. And so it's been in the family for 70 plus years, yeah, or thereabouts. When we first moved in, my older brother Lindsay, the first night they were there, he said, "I'm sleeping in the bathtub." He said they never had a real bed in the other house, so he claimed that bathtub as his bed. And that's where he slept. I don't know for how long, but I was in there the other day, I had a shower over here a week or 2 ago, and I'm thinking, man, how would you sleep with this all night? Well, Mum was a South Sea woman, eh? Her father was brought over in the days of the Kanaka trade, the slave traders. Mum's European name was Dorothy, right? So Dorothy Hughes, they anglicised that last name, where her dad's name was Jimmy Yaus, and Mum's island name was Sanger. and so Sanger Ewis. I don't know that directly from him, but through my mum. I never met him, Granddaddy Jimmy. He was a small boy, he was about 11, 10 or 11. Him and his brother boy was playing on the beach there at Tanner Island. The big boat sailed into just off the island where they were. They'd never seen a big ship before. They didn't know what it was. And next minute there's all these people on it. So it may have been late in the afternoon. And the next morning these men, strange uniforms and stuff, were standing on the beach, and they had different trinkets and stuff that they were showing off. And anyway, he said they said to us, "Oh, you want to go and, like, sign language, you want to go and see what's on the ship?" So all the young men and some women, yes I too, I suppose, they jumped on board the ship, and the next time they seen daylight, there was no land to be seen. They were out the middle of the ocean heading to Australia. So that was his experience. That was passed down to me through my mum. And so his name was, I don't know what his island name was, but it was Ewis was his surname. And so, but he was one of the fortunate ones. He was only a little man. He wasn't a very big man at all. And he got a job as they thought they'd put him on the cane, but he wouldn't have been able to swing a cane knife too well. So they put him on a cattle station, and he was good with horses. And so he got a job with a cattle station owner out there around Winton there somewhere. He even got a mention in some books out there that I've read, and I think he might have worked for some people who were related to R.M. Williams and those sorts of people. So they give him a pretty good rap. So when he came back, when his time was finished, they said to him, "Do you want to go back to the island?" And he said, I won't know anybody there. He said, "It's no good for me." He said, "I've got the kids here." So he bought a property then. They allowed him to buy a property because Aboriginal people weren't allowed to own property. But he was a South Sea Islander, right? He's Kanaka. He could buy property. So going back a long time, that property's still in the family today up there in Joscalee. My dad come from this area. He was actually born in a place called Daboon, which is up in the Boyne Valley, and it's amongst the ranges there. So there's a Mount Hector, which that's his English name, Hector. On the other side of what we know now today as Lake Awonga, there's another mountain that's called Deal. It's Mount Stanley in English, but in Deal it means lightning. And that's how he got his name. Because he was pretty quick on his feet, and he wasn't a bad sort of a boxer as well. And so that's what they named him after, because he was a pretty good boxer. The Gungaloo people gave him a name as well from his boxing history, and they called him Gimal. Gimal's the lizard that you'll see him standing. He's got one paw up like that, and another one down like that, and that's what the name is about. It's about that lizard. So we think our grandmother, on his side, we think that she might have been connected to Gungaloo as well. So they're on the boundary. So back in the day, each clan, I suppose, or tribe, if you want to call them a tribe, had different clan groups and skin groups and moiety systems, and her language group allowed her to speak both those lingos. And so some of the words that we use in our family could be Gungaloo words. And right, and so on the other side of my grandfather, who came from Miriamvale area, he spoke in the coastal dialect of the Gurang. So two distinct different dialects. One's a guttural sort of sound, and the other one's a more polished version of the language. And so he was born on Miriamvale Station, grandfather, and back in the day. And so he moved around a bit. He was a drover, and him and his uncle, his name was Targini Bunda. So Targini Bunda and grandfather used to drive cattle from here down to a place called in northern New South Wales. I forget the name of the place now, but down in Newcastle. Anyway, so what used to happen there, they'd drive the cattle down over a period of months or however long it took, and they would jump on a steamship there in the, Newcastle, and they'd steam back up here at the coast, back here to Gladstone. So why I raised that was when they come through the heads, Gatcombe Heads out here, they could see that mountain over there, and that mountain had a special name, and it was specific to our mob, and we call it Pi. Pi means a cut in the rock, and that's what you see when you look at that mountain. It looks like someone's hit it with a big axe and split it, and so we call it Paili, right? So that's what. And so when they say, "Oh, we're home," right? So once they've seen that island, that mountain, we're home. So that's just little things, right? So when blackfellas talk about country, it doesn't matter out there in the middle of the ocean. They point out the fact that, hey, this is our country too, because under there is land, right? And so the Great Barrier Reef and all those points upon the Barrier Reef, they have connections to our culture. In times past, when the sea levels weren't as where they are now, that was all country. There's cultural heritage out there, and we may not get to see it today, but it's there. And so it's part of who we are, because we've got to know who we are, where we come from, and how we all fit in. It's an Aboriginal culture, I should say, First Nations, Gurang cultures, like other nations. You know, there's a specific connection to their country, and that's what it's about. So, you know, when we talk about our past, we've got to talk about our land, our sea, our animals, the trees, everything that inhabits our environment is part of who we are. And we talk sometimes about, you know, the minerals that are in the soil, and it's been a long held belief of mine that when you look at the human body, we contain the same minerals that's in that soil. And the scriptures tell us that we're made from the dust of the earth. So the dust of the earth and us, we're like brothers. That's where we come from, or sisters. And so it's important to the creation story. We didn't just fall out of the sky. We didn't just get scummed off the top of a pond somewhere. We're created beings, and we're really special. Yeah. So like our environment, you know, we've got specific animals on this land that you'll find nowhere else in the country, even in the world. So there's lots of places like that. You know, I'm not saying it's just here. It's in a lot of places on country that have plants and animals and those sorts of things that are endemic to that region, and so we're part of that. So when you talk it in tribal terms or cultural terms, you've got to understand that one family can't manage all that estate. It's a big estate, and when you have marriage classes and systems and all those sorts of things, moiety, it takes more than one. You've got to have multiples, not just 3 or 4 either. You've got to have, you know, dozens, and so they can all fit and marry across. And so there's some marriages of poison marriages. So my granddad, his first marriage was a poison marriage, right? Because she was the wrong skin for him, and so he had to let her go. I remember uncles telling me that them warriors come from her country looking for her, and they were going to do away with her. But my granny, she was in the house at the same time, and she hit her. They had a little humpy down there near Lomead somewhere, Marine Vale, and so she protected her from those warriors that were coming there to take her away. And what used to happen, they'd kill them, because they shouldn't have married that way, you know. So these things used to happen, and I'm glad they don't happen today. Dad used to travel around a bit, so rodeo rider, boxer, all that sort of stuff. So young black fellas, I suppose, no different to today, getting around doing things, you know, and so they must have met at a dance or something, I don't know. Anyway, Dad was a bit of a lad, so he spent some time pursuing Mum, and I'm not sure whether the Southsea mob liked the old fella, but he didn't care. So they had a relationship. So there was a initial child born, and her name was Judith, and she didn't live long. She only might have lived a couple of years or something. But then there was Jacqueline and Valda and Lindsay, and then Julie, Neola, myself, and Marilyn, my younger sister. And there's a couple of younger ones that were sort of maybe you'd call them change of life babies. One little boy, younger than Marilyn, and Dad had other relationships as well. That he fathered a couple of other daughters, and one today lives in Mackay. And when I look at her and I look at my other sisters, you can't miss it. Anyway, and she's got, I mean, she must have hundreds of kids, grandkids, and great-grandchildren. So it's a big family. So we've grown exponentially over that period of time to this enormous amount of family, and we're blessed. I mean, it's a blessing, and you know, I'm in the twilight years, I suppose, and I like to hang around a little while longer here to see how they grow, and see what they do next. What is priceless to me? We've been really blessed. I mean, our mum and dad lived to be, you know, in their 80s. Lost one of my siblings just last year. He was in his late 70s. He was happy to die, happy to go home to glory, which is important for us fellas. You know, we believe in that thing. That's strong in our thinking, and so there's no regrets about that. I spoke to him before he passed. I said, "Brother, what are you, going or staying?" He said, "I'm going, brother." All right, so how can you argue with that? I'm happy to go. And so, and that's the love thing that was engendered in our family, and for others. You know, I mean, you got to love everyone, right? You mightn't understand them or you mightn't like them, but you got to love them. Yeah. So they're the sorts of things that in our past that I recall that don't seem to be around today. You know, it's priceless to have that ability to love your neighbour as yourself, and you know, to be hard to have that hate in your system for anybody, really. We dislike things that people do, but we can't hate. So that's the takeaway for me today. You know, 2022. I mean, I used to be an angry young man as a young fella, and if I took that anger through to today, I wouldn't have made it. No way in the world. I wouldn't have lived past 40. I've got 11 grandchildren, 3 and 3.5 great-grandchildren, and I see them every week, right? They're around me, and so I'm blessed. I know a lot of people who some of them sadly don't want to see their children. They don't talk to their children. They don't have any sort of relationship, and that's the bit that I regret for some people, is they've lost that love for one another. But it's a blessing, eh? I'm more than blessed.
We're one people, you can trace our family tree all the way through history, back to Adam, back to Eve. We're one blood, we're created in the image of our God, made to worship, made to love. We're one blood. Every language is the same when we laugh or cry. Let's look